This is John Reed, and I am still in my Las Vegas residency, day 11, I think. And you would think my spirits are low, but they're not, because I got Brian Sommer here. Brian, how you doing?
John, I've seen a lot of you lately the last few days.
I know, man. We are definitely doing time, but it's good time because we are at Oracle AI World trying to make sense of a whole flurry of news announcements. And for those who really want to see the video evidence of that, you and I were guests on several live keynote reviews with CRM players, Brent Leary and Paul Greenberg. So if you want our hot off the presses reactions, you can check those out on replay. I'm sure Brent will package some of that up. So we're here to try to make sense of the show, and you've got some notes to help us do that. But before we go there, let's just frame up what kind of a week this was. We had a analyst day briefings all day Monday, and then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Oracle had a bunch of keynotes, so many that I called it Oracle Keynote World. But they released the data and infrastructure news on Tuesday and a bunch of applications news on Wednesday. We're not going to summarize all of that news for you here because you can check it out online. But obviously, a lot of it was agentic stuff. They had the Oracle AI Data Platform, a big announcement on Tuesday, including some new accelerated partnerships with the likes of AMD. Their stock price got a little bump out of those announcements. And then on Wednesday, announcement of one of them was the Oracle Agent Marketplace, opening up a marketplace for partner-built AI agents. And there was a lot of talk about the amount of agents that Oracle has put out. In fact, in our keynote, we talked about how maybe that was a little too much emphasis on the volume of agents, talking about 600 agents being built. A lot of these are very specialized agents. Anyway, so the agentic stuff kind of framed the storyline. But then we also had a couple of really interesting burning questions, one of which was, to what extent does this resonate with customers? And then we also had a really standout provocative and a keynote from Larry Ellison, which I happen to disagree with about a third of the things he said, but the way he said them and the structure was just, I think it was just top-notch keynote, memorable. So we'll get into all of that. So where do you want to start, Brian?
Well, let's see. Let's begin with, I guess, some high-level concepts. First of all, this show, it really wasn't that much about the database and the technology. It's really about all the different kind of changes that businesses are going to have to go through as they try and adjust to a different kind of AI world, and particularly with the technology set that Oracle's bringing to bear here. I mean, it's really stark to see the contrast between how far Oracle has pushed the envelope, if you will, and then to see the customers who are kind of walking around a little in that dazed and confused, how about that for a Led Zeppelin reference, trying to figure out how in the world are we going to do all this. I found myself in a lot of conversations with people wondering about some change management challenges. And I think I want to underline that word challenges. There are some big, gnarly change issues companies are going to have to address. And I didn't hear a lot of discussion on that from the podium, if you will. But I know in different customer interviews and the like that you and I did, John, that came up repeatedly. And you could tell it's a palpable concern for a lot of those customers.
Yeah, and I think what we were really looking to understand was how to sort of connect the dots between Oracle's sort of AI vision and where customers are at. And, the customers I talk with, they like where Oracle is headed with all of this, but that doesn't mean it's a simple thing for them to get there. And one of the big themes that came up again and again in my discussions, including with one of Oracle's supply chain leads, was all the stuff that you need to do to cope with today's business environment is exactly the kind of stuff you're going to need to take advantage of AI, right? So in other words, like in a supply chain scenario, if you have siloed data everywhere in different manufacturing systems, and you're not incorporating relevant external data, like say it's weather data that's really impacting you, or demographic data perhaps, or demand-driven data of some kind from customers, if you don't have those signals in your decision-making, good luck coping with today's supply chain realities. And so talking with these folks, in some ways, I think it's okay that they're not at the point where they're like full on agentic right now because there's so much they need to do inside their organizations to modernize things to be ready for that. And that's why all this BS around SaaS is dead is such a joke to me, because the whole thing is like, get your data platform in order, and then maybe you can talk about the AI part.
Agreed. The data is a big problem. A couple of the speakers were going over that tired line about, data is the new oil. But beyond that kind of glib kind of statement, there's a huge reality there, because when you talk to the customers, that's when you realize that systems that are in use at companies often reflect the band-aided up kind of status of systems that have been built and implemented over 25, 35 years. And they got a mix of generations of old custom built on-prem bespoke stuff with some client server still, with some early stage cloud and, that's the reality of what the customers have. And they've got best of breed stuff all over the place. And then when you get ready to run with this AI technology, you've got to do a lot of janitorial work on cleaning up the data. And that takes time. It takes perspective. It's not a technical only problem. Somebody's got to look at all this and go like, no, that's not right either. And what do you do when you have systems where the meaning of one element in one system is two elements in another one? Who's going to figure out the way to split that up in the future on the old data? So yeah, that's, we could talk all you want about the hard technologies that Oracle brings to bear, but the customer challenges are very real. And the data is probably the spear point of the challenge list of challenges.
I think that's true. And, I thought it was interesting because in Ellison's keynote and elsewhere sometimes with Oracle, they talked up this notion of context and context engineering. And basically what they're talking about there is how enterprise vendors, and Oracle is not special in this regard, have made LLMs perform a lot better by building specialized agents and specialized LLMs use cases where they take an out-of-the-box LLM, whichever performs the best, and Oracle's pretty agnostic now. They have like 7 or 8 that they use.
Right, all the majors, yeah.
Which didn't used to be the case, but now they've really kind of used the right one for the right situation, kind of. And basically, like, providing the right context and information for that LLM to be relevant to that role and do it in a secure way and provide the right kind of data appropriate to the person who's using all of that. But the thing is, a lot of enterprise vendors do that now. So in a way, that's becoming, in my view, table stakes. What makes Oracle a challenge and a beast to evaluate is that they're providing so much more than that, because they're providing all the infrastructure, they're providing their own vector database and all of that. So they're taking it a lot further in terms of their whole AI sort of full stack value proposition. So if you're trying to assess Oracle's AI play, you have to look at everything now. You can't just look at the one part.
And that's a great segue to the second point I had, which was you have to look at the totality of Oracle's breadth and depth of their offerings. You look at just the verticals that they support now is unbelievable. How much they have in not just applications near the top end of the stack, but all the AI tools, the full studio stuff and everything else. Then you've got, like you said, all the LLM capabilities, the integrations with all the other major players. And the way I guess I would describe it is where some of their competitors have built a multi-layered stack for the AI world. It's only toothpick wide in what it's capable of. And Oracle's built something that's, several yards wide in comparison. They have many ways that you can find and get value or tune the solutions whatever to fit your business. That's impressive more than anything else to me. It's so comprehensive.
So let me give you a couple of examples of this from an article I wrote on hot AI topics here, where I kind of pulled out the areas where I think Oracle is differentiating that are not getting enough play. And just to be clear, in case someone thinks I'm doing Oracle fanboy stuff, I'm
Mhm.
pretty critical of a lot of some of the things that Ellison said about AI, and I don't agree with him on how important quote unquote reasoning is. By the way, I think he sees it as a future. I see it as a one technique that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work very well. So that's just an example to kind of get some criticism out there to show that I'm not just drinking Kool-Aid here. One of the sections I have on my thing is about how does Oracle have a AI pricing advantage, because AI vendors and enterprise vendors are all struggling with pricing because they have to balance investor expectations for charging premiums versus customers where they just want them to adopt the solutions. And so a lot of vendors are rolling out these convoluted pricing screens that are so hard to wrap your head around. And you're like, wait, how does it work? Um, and so Miranda, and Monday, he comes charging out, and he mentioned some of this in the keynote too, but he said there's no additional charge for our AI agents. They're embedded. So all those agents they're talking about, whatever, 600, whatever, there's no charge for those, right? And
Well,
that's,
none for well, that's true. He actually said even the other, if they're in the marketplace that Oracle offers, they're no charge.
right.
But a third party could build
Well, right.
agents,
Yeah, yeah.
and they could
I'll
charge for it.
finish my overview and it'll make more sense. These are not necessarily in the marketplace because they're actually part of the Oracle product. The marketplace stuff you will have to pay for because those are partner solutions. Partners have to monetize. But basically, Oracle's core agentic offerings that are built into the solutions are not charged for. So, for example, Steve Miranda said, we have this great general ledger or whatever. When we improve that with AI, with a smart GL, that's not an extra cost. And I think ultimately that's right in the sense that I think the market's going to show that people are just going to expect AI enablement in their software. They're not going to expect to pay for all those features. But Oracle also does have premium offerings in AI. Some of them have to do with which model you use. They have an open source model that you can use called GPT OSS from OpenAI. You can use all of that you want in a month, but if you want to use their premium LLM, that you get 200 million tokens or what have you. So the point is, like, there are some that, and then if you want to customize agents on your own as a customer, then you do have a user-based pricing model and stuff like that. So the point is not that they never charge, but the point is that a lot of it is built in and it just makes sense. And the emphasis is on adoption and deployment. And so tying this back to the infrastructure side, I think the reason Oracle can do that, at least from their vantage point, is because they can absorb a lot of the costs of managing this internally. And whether or not that's true, I don't know. But what I do know is they have a better pricing plan than most of their competitors.
So let me pile on there. The competitors, particularly the publicly traded firms, they're on the hook to Wall Street to constantly grow revenue. And they want these vendors to do two things. They want them to continue to sell a subscription on the core applications and then sell additional capabilities around the AI functionality or whatever, technology. So they're trying to double dip. They want the PE firms and the Wall Street firms. They somehow think that customers have a super elastic ability to assimilate price gouging from vendors, and that's just not true. And I think the smart buyers are going to sniff this stuff out and are going to not choose some of these other players who are trying to basically bend them over and take a huge chunk of wallet capital out. So you're right on that one. I would agree. Their pricing is refreshing to find out that it's probably so much more understandable than what the other firms are doing.
And I think you can probably do that when you have such a lucrative and effective infrastructure play that allows you to bring in revenues and defray some of those costs. And now some people were pressing Oracle on does OpenAI write hot checks, basically? But the point is they're cutting a lot of big deals, and that really helps, I think, to defray some of the pressure on just selling applications related to AI licensing. But for whatever reason, the pricing just makes more sense. Whatever the reason for it, it's just better, and I think that is going to help them with adoption, which is core. And the other thing I'm going to give Oracle some credit for here is that while I did hear some grandiose future of AI stuff at times, when you really drill into Miranda's keynotes, and I wrote about this based on my interview with Steve last week, he's really talking about more modest gains based on specialized agents. And his point is that it might just be a 5% gain here, a 5% gain there, but that adds up over time. And also that when you start doing more modest stuff, you start figuring out how to jump through the hoops with how to use these tools, how to make sure you have human supervision added, which is something they've made very easy to do within their agentic
their studio tool. Yeah.
So, and they demonstrated that to the audience, right? And so the idea there being get used to these tools and start saving a bit and then add up a little bit. But I find that refreshing because they weren't going in saying like 10x, 20x, this is going to revolutionize everything for you. They're saying, get started, start saving some stuff and start learning how to use these tools. And I think that's actually a better message. Having said that, as you and I discussed, like I think a lot of customers are still not even necessarily at that point yet, but I think it's a nice message to give them, which is let's get real about this. It's not going to be this revolutionary thing where you get to, Miranda told me like some customers, they get this hype and they think they can fire their whole accounts payable team tomorrow because of these tools. And he's saying like, that's not the case. There's going to be a backlash on that because that's not going to be the reality. But you might make some people's jobs easier. You might free up some time. You might be able to redo some processes to make them more efficient. And that should be your short-term goal, not these elaborate things of like, oh, we just were able to cut 1,000 people loose with redundancies from what the AI can do or whatever. He's saying call him BS on that, but let's get started and do some stuff and start building up some stuff. And that's also based on their own internal experience inside of Oracle that gives them the confidence to say that. So
I've got something, well, I'll tell you, let's go to the next point.
We'll hold on whatever Brian was holding on. I'll try to pry that out of him in our next month in review show. What's your next point?
Well, it's kind of related. That's kind of why I was kind of taking a deep breath.
All right. Okay, so here we go.
We're segueing.
Bring the hammer, Brian. What you got?
Okay, so I want to talk about this gap question and talk about how Oracle is probably out in front of its customers by a measurable, distance.
Yep.
And there is this gap between where Oracle's at and probably where a lot of the customers are. And I'm going to go old school tech talk at this point. And
by the way, for frame of reference, we talked to a customer today that's still running PeopleSoft. Just to give you an example of where some customers are at currently.
Yeah, I thought it was tacky when John handed the guy some arthritis medication.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey man, you got to cope with the pain of PeopleSoft somehow.
Some of those old products,
those heavily customized PeopleSoft tables that cause a fit young man to have pain.
So where I wanted to go with this is I want to remind listeners that there was a book 25, 30 years ago by Jeffrey Moore called Crossing the Chasm. And Jeff opined that there's a thing called the technology adoption life cycle. It's a bell curve, and there were 5 segments of buyers in that curve. On the far left tail were a percentage point or two of buyers called the innovators. There were 3 to 7% more buyers that were called early adopters. There was the chasm. Then you had the early and late majority, which is probably 70% of the market, those 2 categories. And then finally, my favorite bunch of all are the laggards, which are probably like the last 10% or whatever. I wasn't doing the math in my head while I was telling you that, but those are just rough ideas. The reason I point that out is each one of those demographic groups has a different buying profile and a risk profile. And the people that were probably glomming all over some of the announcements Oracle were making were the ones who are probably already knew about a lot of this stuff and have a command around AI concepts that's really deep. Those are the innovators. Think about companies that like make silicon wafers or semiconductor chips, whatever. You don't go to an IT meeting unless you're wearing a white lab coat. It's that kind of high-end innovation. That's why they're only like 1% of the market. Early adopters right behind them, and both of those segments are looking for competitive advantage. They would come here to find out all the cool stuff because they need to get a 3, 5, 7-year lead over some of their competition in their industry. On the other end of the spectrum, when you get to laggards, what I've learned is a lot of, say, transportation companies, unless you're FedEx or UPS, are pretty much laggard and late majority buyers. They buy something that's a proven technology, that everybody else in the industry has already bought it, that it works right out of the box and they can buy it at a deep discount. That market's not ready for what Oracle's selling today. But they'll buy the stuff from, the innovators, the early adopters, and the early majority. They're here and they're interested in this.
Let me parse that a little bit, though. I agree with what you're saying, but I think there's different kinds of laggards too, because there's laggards that are more maybe organizationally troubled. Like I'm thinking of one company that was referenced today where after the founder moved on for 5 years, it stagnated. And like you can run into situations like that with organizations that just fall behind. But we talked to the PeopleSoft customer we talked to today. I think they may be behind, but they do want to change. And I think what's interesting about that example is that they really liked hearing about the agentic AI stuff they said. This gives us even more confidence that we made the right decision, even though they know they're not close to consuming that yet. They need to get onto Fusion apps first. They have some stuff ahead of them. Mm-hmm. But they did like hearing that. It gave them confidence, and I think that's important. But where the gotcha comes in is Oracle has to make sure that people like that go home from a conference like this with the stuff they need also, because to your point, that's not the primary reason why they're here. They didn't come to hear about agents, right? Like that was more of a bonus. They came to solve some specific issues around what are we going to do next with our go live, right? And they need to come back to their team and say, here's what we got from the conference along those lines. And I suspect that a lot of what they needed to get was not in the keynotes. It was in the sessions and in the meetings that they had while they were here,
Yeah, and interesting about this conference, I didn't see something I see at some other ones where people show up, particularly the higher level executives, and you can't find them at the conference because the salesperson's taking them out golfing and they're doing all kinds of other distracted things. But these had lots of those kind of executives. They're in here and knee deep in meetings. And the integrators, I think, were pushing, for those sidebar meetings as well. But back on track with the life cycle, the gap, I think, is substantial particularly for late majority and laggard buyers. They may not be ready to really pull the trigger in any material way for possibly several years. And to their own detriment. They really need to be careful about how much their competition gets out there. Because for the ones at the front end of that life cycle who are looking for a competitive advantage, the next bunch is looking for competitive parity. They're looking for something that just keeps me up with the Joneses, if you will. Yeah. And then there's that last bunch that's just looking for something cheap. And I don't think the cheap buyers are in the wrong conference if they came here. One related point on this, if I showed up at the show and I was, let's say, an HR manager, and I came here to spend 2 or 3 glorious days reveling in nothing but product roadmap data and function updates and regulatory functional support, data about Oracle, Fusion, payroll, whatever, I probably would have left a little bit disappointed because that kind of content was not the star of the show. It was, like you've been talking about, it's some of the cool things with not just AI, but creating a new way of running your business.
So let's talk for a couple minutes about Larry Ellison's keynote, because it's pretty rare that I watch a keynote that I actually enjoyed really engaging with intellectually, even though, like I said, I disagree with a number of things that Larry said, but I also like the ambition of it. And I also like the mentality of at least trying to tackle some real thorny problems, whether it's energy consumption or obviously healthcare was core to that message. What was sort of your take on that? And why do you think someone who didn't attend this conference might want to queue up a 2-hour keynote? Because that's pretty rare that you and I would recommend that someone not at a conference rewatch a keynote later, let's be honest. But you might want to watch this one, right? I mean, do you feel that way? I kind of do.
Yeah, well, first of all, this was a keynote that didn't need a crutch. You didn't need to have a sports athlete come out.
No marching bands.
No flash pots, no drum corps, none of that junk. Larry basically came out, sat down in a chair, and then I think he was only supposed to talk for an hour. What did he end up going, like an hour and 45?
It was almost 2 hours, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And what made the talk so solid was he describes all these technologies and things and problems in customers from a very first person kind of perspective. He talked about things he noticed a few years ago when his wife was having a sonogram because of she was pregnant at the time. And Larry was just appalled at the state of the art in medical electronic data transfer and all that at that time. He gave many examples. He even talked about going to a Tesla operation to go find out how they, what's in their robots, how they build them, where does the software come through and all that. And through it all, what Larry was doing was basically bringing the thousands of people here and God knows how many watching virtually on a kind of recap of the things he's been looking at the last year or 2 or 3 or whatever, and how he saw the problems in the business world. And he'd be the first one to acknowledge that processes are broke. People are suffering as a result of some of the screw ups in there. Businesses are suffering because they're not getting paid or paid in a timely fashion, what have you. And you got the feeling listening to him that finally I'm talking to a real person who understands the problems or similar problems to what our own firm has or our own spouses or kids or whatever. He gets it. And then he was describing in the same breath, he would talk about how he wants to turn some of this technology loose, and to solve these issues or how some partners are. It was not scripted. It was not the overly polished marketing speak that you get from so many other folks. And what I walked away with, this is so atypical of this kind of, he was the CEO here for God knows how many years, but even though now he's just chairman of the board and CTO, how do you like that? It's like you're hearing something you don't hear from the usual crop of CEOs in software who are installed by private equity overlords or some Wall Street firm or whatever, who are professional executives who I don't think really relate to people, and they don't understand the problems that well. And they sure don't spend enough time with the customers and the customers to come the way Larry did. Larry understood the processes at a level that most executives don't. And that's what worked.
100%. In my, I wrote a couple big AI pieces today you can check out on Diginomica, but I did take Ellison to task a little bit I said Ellison seems to think LLMs and massive data centers are the cornerstones of our AI future. I hope not. I believe we'll see breakthroughs in the years to come that allow for more energy efficient types of AI with better world models and so on. Credit to Ellison for trying to solve truly vexing real-world problems, but I'd like to think some of these will be solved by streamlined AI, the type of AI that doesn't force strained energy grid costs on the consumer's electric bills. So, I took him to task on some things, but I end up saying it's a must-watch keynote, and that's the whole point. Because what I said at the end of my piece was, it was just one guy sitting in a chair. If that's not a wake-up call to enterprise marketers, I don't know what is, right? So in other words, like you might disagree like I did with certain things that he said, but what a pleasure to hear something so intellectually substantive that you would actually care, like,
And he was talking about how we need to change the way crops are grown, and he's
yeah.
talking about
And by the way,
carbon.
he did discuss some of the energy issues and how they could be solved. So it's
Right.
not like
And he talked about carbon capture and through wheat and genome splicing or whatever, and the wheat DNA. And he went through a bunch of these things, which he never once made any of this political. I mean, he basically just talked about it like, these are the problems we've got. You may
Right.
not agree with every one of his solutions or every one of or every aspect of them all, but I give him credit for, he hit the hard subjects. He hit them good too. And you didn't hear anybody in the audience have a problem with it. And I mean, big crowd.
Yep. So if you didn't catch that, you may really want to consider watching it, and I'm pretty sensitive towards the whole AI is going to fix our broken healthcare system thing. But I liked how he talked about it. And like when Sam Altman says like AI is going to cure cancer, it seems kind of idealistic and uninformed. But when Larry talks about cancer detection with AI, he talks specifically about how that can happen,
right,
and what's in your bloodstream that could be triggered that an AI could recognize. And I just think there's so much to learn from that example. So Oracle, congratulations. You actually delivered a keynote that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time.
And that was one small data point out of gobs of them that he just tossed out kind of matter-of-factly over there, which, again, points to the depth of his understanding and how much homework he's been doing on these spaces. So,
indeed. Well, Brian, we're on the home stretch. What's on your pad, man? You've got a list of pad. What else do we need to cover?
Well, I had a point here I wanted to, I think there's some market education is definitely going to be needed and I think differentiation is going to really start popping out. Right now, every vendor kind of sounds the same. We've got, they're all talking about the healing powers of agentic AI, and we've been hearing all that kind of stuff. But what we haven't been hearing are the really crisp points that drive out the real differentiation. And I think software buyers ought to take note of that comment because it's going to be hard to compare vendors other than through gut feel. In fact, when I've asked some customers here, basically the rationale they've given for why they chose, let's say, Oracle has been more really soft, squishy, intangible things. I'm not sure they, maybe what the market needs are some great buyer's guides to help people figure out what do I go with and how do I figure out where the differentiation is. That was not a shameless plug for me wanting to do one of those, but I just tell you that I think that's what's needed.
We did issue a bit of a roundup of our Oracle coverage for buyers, but that's just the beginning of what buyers need. They need rigorous evaluation of all of this and with informed expert third parties that really understand where all of this is going. And that's not an easy thing to find. I wanted to mention briefly on the partner side that it'll be important to follow the partner story in terms of how partners are delivering on these new business models. And I filmed one partner. I'm going to hopefully produce that footage, Auditoria AI, which does a lot of accounts payable and finance automation, things like that. And then we heard from Apex, which is one of the launch partners for the Oracle AI Marketplace. And the notable thing I thought from Apex during the session we did with them, this was CX related. I don't think you were there. The interesting thing the Apex person said is that they've been doing a lot of AI development, but they're finding more traction on Oracle than other so-called ecosystems. And the reason is they're doing more end-to-end stuff inside of Oracle. So they showed a demonstration that involved some components of Oracle CX, but tying into some back-end visibility through ERP as well. I'll be writing about this and go into more details. I don't want to get into it right now. But the point is, what they're saying, which I think is really important for buyers to understand, is that a lot of this multi-vendor agent-to-agent stuff it's not science fiction, but it's out of reach right now unless you really want a hard integration problem ahead, which is what they were saying. It's like a lot of custom integration still. Whereas on the Oracle platform, we can build stuff that crosses different boundaries inside the business in one platform. And I thought that was an interesting message in terms of where AI is at right now for customers. So,
Yeah, when I hear something like that, the first thought is, ooh, sounds like lock-in or, but your point's absolutely spot on that if you're going to implement this AI stuff, you want all the data to be consistent and have the same kind of rules on it. And this having a loose federation of a bunch of best of breed stuff and custom stuff is not going to get you very far. If you're trying to build large string large numbers of agents together and create some new kinds of workflows, if you're pulling all this junk in, it'll be a pill.
And believe me, I'm not a fan of lock-in at all. It's
Yeah.
just that there's an underlying data reality to this technology right now. And once you start having agents talking to agents, you have compound error problems.
Yep.
And it gets tougher and tougher. And so he wasn't saying it could not be done, but he was just saying that now you're adding a whole bunch of complexity. And why would you want to do that right now when you're struggling to realize value? And you can still, of course, be using a lot of best of breed components in your day-to-day transactional world if you want. But he was just saying in terms of building agents. I just thought it was interesting because he was saying that's what he's finding on projects. It wasn't like he intentionally said, I want to just do Oracle stuff. He was just saying it was easier. So maybe Oracle will end up playing that up a little bit. Okay, what else you got in your notes there?
I only have one other thing, and that is I just want to make the point that some of their competitors, particularly in the application software space, really should be concerned. Again, back to that earlier point about the breadth and depth of their product, the enormous amount of capability in their stack. I mean, most of the competitors, they don't have the data centers and the security and everything else that these guys possess. I mean, they own that stack and they have the breadth of applications. And that's what's going to make some of the deployment of this when you run a large workflow, whatever, across a whole bunch of modules with the same functionality, the same data dictionary, the same underlying tool set. That's going to be a big help for Oracle customers.
One of the points I've been trying to make to people is that the dominant enterprise software vendors have more of an incumbent advantage with AI than people want to accept. Because when AI come along, it was like, oh, there's going to be AI ERP now, and it's going to destroy the current market and all of that. But that's just not how today's AI works. Today's AI is so dependent on vast amounts of quality data, that it's hard to build it from scratch, but it's an advantage. You still have to follow through. And I think Oracle may be the best example of a company that took the advantage and seized it. And when you start to see what they're doing, you start to see how, you might be able to launch a successful AI ERP product, but Oracle's going to be around too. They're not going anywhere. They got a full stack advantage right now, and they're exploiting it. And for the most part, I think they're doing what customers want them to do. But, like we discussed, there are still a lot of customers that have to be brought along. And I asked Miranda that question in the last QA, and he did acknowledge that there's a lot of customers that are not there yet. And he talked about the different things that they need to do to get there. And he said a lot of it is overcoming internal resistance to AI and proving it out. But some of that resistance, I think, is a resistance to change, but some of that resistance is valid questions that need answering, right? And, customers have questions about data privacy. Even if Oracle is doing all the right things with that, you still have to answer those questions to the customer's satisfaction. One thing I just wanted to mention in my piece today, I talked about agentic evaluation because I said, why do so many enterprise vendors lack these tools? I've been asking every vendor this year about their agentic evaluation tools. No one has given me a good answer. They've said, well, we provide the explainability the customer needs, but explainability and evaluation are different. Explainability shows the user where the information was sourced. It doesn't tell them what went wrong. It doesn't give them a perspective on how many things were answered correctly and what doesn't. Oracle just released a whole bunch of stuff on this, including a monitoring dashboard, performance evaluation, tracing agents, performance metrics, and token usage, which is important because there are consumption restrictions, especially for premium LLMs. This is something that no other vendor that I've covered this year has done. And I don't understand why vendors don't get that observability, evaluation, all of this stuff is how you earn trust. And trust is how you're going to get AI business. I don't think you're going to get AI business if your customer doesn't trust you. So once again, wake up call, other vendors need to be doing this stuff. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of other vendors have been racing to get something out to show a prospect,
Right.
a demo, whatever, a proof of concept, but they haven't really thought about the packaging that's required to actually get the stuff sold. That means anticipating what the objections are going to be or the questions coming up from the customer, make sure they've got killer responses for that. And more importantly, make sure they actually built it into the platform to begin with. So I hear you.
Should we briefly talk before we wrap, because we do need to close this out, but we probably should mention briefly, this was the first time with the new leadership structure. Do you have any impressions on that? Because we didn't have the Safra Katz keynote this time, but we had Mike Cecilia.
Yeah.
And then we also heard from Clay. Clay has a lot of chops from the OCI side, so I kind of like that he's got that background because he was able to answer a lot of actually tough questions about OCI in some of the press conferences, which were funny. Like, are you afraid of so-and-so taking your business or blah, blah, blah? And he's like, no. But anyway, he was able to explain technically why they're doing what they're doing, which I thought was good to see. But any thoughts on the leadership transitions?
I guess I would put it this way. I've seen a lot of transitions over here over the years. I don't want to tell you how many years I've been looking at and covering Oracle, but I count it in decades, not years. And I remember when Larry was the CEO, and then at one point Jeffrey Walker was the CFO of the company, and then afterwards Ray Lane came on board, a former vice chairman of Booz Allen, and he was, I think technically the title then was president. Then at some point we pick up Safra and Mark Hurd, and then Safra, and before that Safra and Chuck Phillips, Charles Phillips. Yep. And then Mark Hurd briefly for a few years. And anyway, now we're Safra has been a solid executive for this company. I mean, I can't say anything bad about her. And now you've got these two fellows who are not new to Oracle at all. They've been around for a while. They know this stuff. Like you were talking about, Clay's command on the technology stack is pretty solid. Clay, though, McCurk, I think he's probably very comfortable in front of customers. He seems like a customer-facing kind of executive is kind of the vibe I pick up from him. Could he give the talk that Larry gave? And I'd probably say no, but he could probably give a talk that will keep Wall Street happy, but we'll have to see that. I mean, they're brand new in these roles, so we shouldn't be undermining either one of them or second guessing them. Let's give them a chance and ask me the question at next year's Oracle AI Cloud World Summit.
I kind of got the feeling that they didn't have a high pressure debut at this conference because it kind of sort of felt like the Oracle, to your point around past leadership, that it rolls on, right? And they're going to have a chance to prove their mettle or not. But it didn't really feel high stakes, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, oh, if Cecilia better nail this keynote or whatever. It felt like they were comfortable in their roles, and we'll see over time what happens.
Yeah, that was kind of I would agree. It felt like, I think I said Clay a moment ago, and I meant Mike Cecilia. Yeah. Neither one of them gave what I would call a CEO speech. The vision that you would expect coming out of the CEO, we actually got that later when we heard Larry, who's got the CTO title, but he's also chairman, so he can do a hell of a job. So I don't really think we need to worry about the leadership. The only reason we'd ever need to worry is if something ever did happen to Larry. And,
Right.
that's it.
Yeah, it was more just, I thought it was worth touching on in terms of the fact that it was definitely different because, Safra's like customer keynote was sort of a tradition, right? And so,
Mhm.
but Oracle rolls on. We're done, Brian. We go home. Let's go home, man.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, first of all, I don't need any more airline flights to Vegas this year, and I don't think you want to spend any more days here in Las Vegas.
No, and I got Breeze Airlines tomorrow, and I got a feeling that's not going to be a breeze either. Anyhow, here we go, Brian. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks.